The thud of wooden swords echoed through the dojo as Zoro stepped back, breathing hard but grinning. His opponent, a taller, older boy with shoulders like a sumo and pink hair, lay on the floor clutching his ribs, groaning. His name was Urashima. The sparring match had ended quickly, with Zoro dodging a wild swing and countering with a clumsy but decisive strike. The other students murmured in surprise. Some were impressed. Others, less so. Wow, Zoro is amazing being able to beat someone big like Urashima while being so small. Even Kuina had problems when facing Urashima. From the far end of the dojo, Kushiro had been watching quietly, arms folded. His expression was unreadable as he approached. "You won," Kushiro said simply. Zoro wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, still breathing hard. "Of course I did. He was slow and I could move much faster because of my small body." Kushiro studied him for a moment before speaking again. "Yes, but you also nearly tripped twice. Your stance collapsed on your last step, and if he had been just a little faster, your balance would have betrayed you." Zoro frowned. "I still beat him. And that is the most dangerous thought for a swordsman," Kushiro replied, his tone still calm but carrying weight. "Winning does not mean you fought well. It only means you fought better than your opponent, this time." The dojo went silent. Even Urashima on the floor stopped groaning. Kushiro stepped to the center and gestured for Zoro to come closer. "Before you can call yourself a swordsman, before strength, speed, or technique, there is posture and footwork. Without these, every swing is a gamble." Zoro stood before him, wooden sword in hand, eyes narrowed but listening. "Watch closely," Kushiro said. He took a stance, his feet shoulder-width apart, knees bent just enough to absorb movement. His weight was perfectly centered, not leaning forward or backward, and his shoulders were relaxed. Balance is the root of offense and defense. A firm stance allows you to meet the force of larger, stronger enemies without being pushed back. Without it, a single blow will send you to the ground, no matter how strong you think you are. He stepped forward smoothly, almost gliding, then shifted back just as easily. Footwork is the sword's silent partner. Every step you take changes your reach, your angle, and your timing. Good footwork keeps you in range when attacking, and out of range when defending. Zoro tried to imitate the movement, planting his feet wide. "Too stiff," Kushiro corrected, tapping Zoro's knee lightly with his bakken. "Flex your legs. Let them carry your weight without locking up. You must be ready to move at any moment, forward, back, left, right. If you cannot move, you cannot fight." Zoro adjusted, trying again. This time, his movement was more fluid. "Better," Kushiro said. "With proper posture and footwork, you can control the bottle's pace. Without them, you're just swinging a sword and hoping it works." Zoro scowled, but his eyes burned with determination. "All right, show me again." Kushiro smiled faintly. "We will not move to the second principle until the first becomes part of your body. This is the foundation, Zoro. A swordsman who cannot stand cannot win, no matter how strong his swing." Later that week, he challenged one of the older and larger students. "Ashimaru, let's have a duel." Zoro challenged. "I refuse, my specialty is not swordsmanship and when wielding a sword I am terrible at it," Ashimaru said as he picked his ear. "Unlike my brother Ashura, I excel in sumo and not swordsmanship. I came to this dojo to see whether I could be as strong as my brother, but I learned that I can be as strong as him by being a sumo wrestler," Ashura said. Zoro just looked at him as if not understanding what the problem was. "So use your hands then." Zoro said. Urashima and the other students nearby paused and looked at Zoro as if he's lost his mind. "Are you crazy? Do you want him to lose his hands?" they all yelled in unison. Fine, then you come up here and let's have a duel," Zoro said, having given up on challenging Ashura. He pointed at another student randomly. Before the said student could answer Zoro. "Wait, I have a better idea, why don't you all come at me all at once," Zoro said with a smirk. "Okay, now you're just being arrogant," one student said. "Yeah," the other students agreed. "Let's teach him a lesson." All the students charged at Zoro, wooden bakkens in hand. Zoro smiled like a predator as he held his two wooden bakkens and faced all the incoming students with vigor and excitement. Outside, the wind whispered through the dojo walls as the boy began to drill the most basic movement, over and over, unaware that this was the first step toward becoming the swordsman he dreamed of being. Speed and grip. The following afternoon, the rhythmic crack of wooden swords filled the dojo. Students paired off, trading blows under Kushiru's watchful gaze. Zoro was in the middle of his match, his movements sharper than yesterday. His posture was better, legs steady, steps firm. But every swing of his bakken was fierce, heavy, and reckless. Crack. The sound was sharper than the others. Zoro blinked down at the splintered wood in his hands. The tip of his bakken lay on the floor a few steps away. Some of the younger students giggled. One whispered, "That's what happens when you swing like a wild boar," said a student who was once a victim of Zoro's aggressive offense. Before Zoro could bark back, Kushiru's voice cut through the room. Enough. He walked over, knelt, and picked up the broken piece of wood. His expression was unreadable, but his tone held quiet disappointment. "Zoro, do you know what this means?" Zoro straightened, gripping the jagged bakken handle. "It means I hit too hard." Kushiro shook his head slowly. "No. It means you have disrespected your sword." Zoro frowned. "It's just wood. It's not like I broke a real blade." "That is the kind of thinking that gets swordsmen killed," Kushiro replied, voice calm but carrying the weight of a reprimand. He held the broken piece out in front of Zoro's face. "A sword, whether steel or wood, is an extension of yourself. When it breaks from your carelessness, it is as if you have broken. To treat a sword as disposable is shameful, to a swordsman, to your teacher, and to yourself." The dojo was silent. Even the giggling students kept their eyes down. Kushiro stood, holding his own bakken lightly in one hand. "This brings us to the second principle of swordsmanship, grip and control." He stepped into a ready stance, the wooden sword held with both hands. "Your grip changes the nature of every strike. Too tight, and you sacrifice speed and fluidity. Too loose, and your blade will be knocked away or shatter like yours just did. You need to bring out the power out of each blade without overdoing because if you do it breaks." He demonstrated, loosening his hold until the bakken almost floated in his palms, then tightening just as he struck, delivering a precise blow that made the air whistle. A light but firm grip for speed. A strong, deliberate grip for heavy strikes. You must learn to change between them as easily as breathing. Zoro watched closely, his jaw set. "Control," Kushiro continued, "is knowing where your blade will land before you swing. It is not enough to hit hard. You must know what you are hitting, and why. A swordsman without control is just a thug with steel in his hands." He tossed Zoro a fresh bakken. Zoro caught it without breaking eye contact. "From this day forward," Kushiro said, "you will never break another sword through carelessness. If you do, you will spend the day cleaning this dojo with your bare hands. Am I understood?" Zoro tightened his grip, the wood creaking faintly. "Understood. Good." Kushiru's expression softened, just a little. "Now, show me you can hold a sword without breaking it." Later that day, the students were running laps around the village with Kiyoshiro following closely behind them. It made for a beautiful scenery as the sun was setting in the background. Most of the students were already struggling to keep up. This was their fourth lap around the village and there were still 6 more remaining. Just as the other students were contemplating giving up, they saw Zoro passing them and leaving them in the dust. Not only that, but while he was at it, he was carrying another student on his back. He had said this was extra training, the training they were doing was too easy. This motivated the other students because not only was Zoro carrying another student but he had overlapped them for the 3rd time now. "Damn it, we can't be losing this badly. We might not be as strong as him but that doesn't mean we are not strong," one of the students said. "Yeah," the other students agreed and they began picking up the pace, pushing themselves to their limits as they attempt to catch up to Zoro. Seeing this take place, Kushiro smiled. Later that night, Zoro was practicing alone under the moonlight, swinging his wooden blades against a wooden dummy and had a barbell in his mouth. Sweat poured down his face but that did not obscure the determination that was in his eyes. "I will be the greatest swordsman." Later. By late afternoon, sweat clung to every student in the dojo. The air was heavy with the smell of worn tatami and oiled wood. Kushiro called for a pause, then stepped into the center of the floor with his bakken. His gaze swept over the students, finally resting on Zoro. "Today," he began, "we move to the 3rd principle, speed and timing." He walked over to the far wall, where a worn training dummy stood, a thick bundle of bamboo wrapped in straw. Deep grooves marked where countless cuts had landed over the years. "Speed," Kushiro said, is not about moving first. It is about moving at the right moment. He stood still before the dummy, the tip of his bakken lowered. Then, without warning, he moved, the wooden blade blurring as it slashed clean through the top half of the straw bundle. The cut was so precise that the upper section slid off slowly, collapsing to the floor with a dull thud. Zoro's eyes widened. He'd seen Kushiro move fast before, but not like that. It wasn't just speed, it was as if the strike had already been decided before Kushiro's body moved. Too soon, Kushiro explained, and your opponent will see your intent and counter. Too late, and you will be cut down before your strike lands. He turned to face the students. Iaido, the art of drawing and striking in one motion, is where speed and timing are most critical. Watch closely. Kushiro sheathed his bakken into an imaginary scabbard at his hip. His entire body seemed to still, even his breathing slowed. Then, in one smooth motion, he drew and struck, the sound of the cut sharp and final. This time, the bakken sliced so cleanly that a thin curl of straw peeled away like a ribbon. That, he said, lowering the weapon, is why even a slower swordsman can defeat a faster one, if their timing is perfect. He gestured to Zoro. Come, try. Zoro stepped forward, taking his stance before the dummy. His grip was better now, controlled. His feet planted with the posture Kushiro had drilled into him earlier. He took a breath, pictured the strike, then moved. The cut landed, but a heartbeat too late. The bakken hit the straw with force, tearing fibers instead of slicing clean through. Kushiro nodded. Faster, but not rushed. Anticipate the moment, and make the strike part of it, not separate from it. Zoro gritted his teeth. He hated failing. But he also hated giving up more. He reset his stance. From the sidelines, the other students whispered, some betting Zoro would mess it up again. But this time, Zoro didn't swing right away. He waited, watching the dummy as if it might move. Then, the instant his muscles tensed, he let the blade fly. Thwack! The top half of the bundle split cleanly. Not as perfect as Kushiro's, but close enough that the whispering stopped. Kushiro gave the faintest of smiles. Better. Speed is nothing without timing. Timing is nothing without control. Control is nothing without posture. Remember that, these principles are the foundation of all swordsmanship. Zoro exhaled, sweat dripping down his chin. In his mind, the broken bakken from earlier was already forgotten, replaced by the image of that perfect, clean cut he'd just made. Later that day, Zoro had completed the other training. Not only did he do that, but he increased the speed at which he completed the training. Now he was lifting weights using a pulley system with boulders tied at the end of both ropes on the other side. With a weight in his mouth he pulled like a crazed man. The other students stared at him like he was some sort of demon. The training they were doing was hard, but what Zoro was doing was just on another level, and day after day he got even bigger boulders and ran even faster. Later that evening at the dojo yard, the courtyard of the Shimotsuki dojo was silent in the early dawn. Mist clung to the ground, and the first light of morning cast long, thin shadows of the bamboo stalks swaying gently in the breeze. Zoro, barely 10, knelt in Seiza position, sweat already beading on his forehead from the long meditation Kushiro had ordered. Kushiro stood behind him, his geta tapping lightly on the polished wood before stopping. Zoro, his voice was soft yet cut through the stillness. You swing a sword with your arms. But a swordsman breathes with his whole being. Zoro opened one eye. Breath. What's that got to do with cutting down my opponent? Kushiro walked past him, stopping to face the rising sun. Everything. Breath is life. If you can control your breath, you can control your body. And if you can control your body, you can control the battle itself. He crouched down to Zoro's level. From now on, you'll train in total concentration breathing. Zoro tilted his head. Total concentration. Yes, these are the basics required to slay demons or go up against them. Before you learn any type of breathing style, you need to learn total concentration, Kushiro said, nodding once. You will inhale with force, filling every corner of your body with air. You will imagine the oxygen rushing into your blood, strengthening your muscles, sharpening your mind. Then you exhale slowly, releasing everything unnecessary, fear, hesitation, doubt. Kushiro took a deep, deliberate breath, his chest expanding like a calm but unstoppable tide. Zoro could hear the air moving through him, steady and controlled. The man's presence seemed heavier somehow, as if even the air bowed to his will. Watch closely. He placed a single bamboo leaf on the ground in front of them. Breathe in, feel your heartbeat in rhythm with the world. Exhale, and strike before the leaf shifts from the breeze. In a flash, Kushiru's Bakudo moved. The leaf split in half, still in place, as though it hadn't realized it had been cut. Zoro's eyes went wide. You didn't even move that fast. Kushiro shook his head. Speed comes from breath. Strength comes from breath. Focus comes from breath. He rested the Bakudo on his shoulder. Without it, you will be like a candle in the wind. With it, you will be the wind itself. From that day, Zoro's days began with a grueling regimen, running while holding his breath to expand his lungs, meditating under waterfalls to control his breathing under pressure, and swinging until his breaths were perfectly in sync with each strike. Sometimes, he collapsed. Sometimes, his chest burned as if it would burst. But every time, he rose again, his breaths deeper, steadier, deadlier. And Kushiro would always say the same thing. A swordsman's blade is only as sharp as the breath that guides it. Focus can paralyze. The late afternoon sun filtered through the branches of the old maple behind the dojo. Cicadas buzzed lazily in the summer heat, their song blending with the distant sound of wooden swords clashing in the training yard. Under the shade of the tree, Kushiro sat cross-legged on the grass. Zoro, still catching his breath from sparring, plopped down across from him. Close your eyes, Kushiro said, his voice calm as still water. Zoro frowned. Why? I'm not tired. This isn't rest. This is training. Reluctantly, Zoro obeyed. Kushiru's tone took on a quiet, steady rhythm. Focus all your mind on a single thought. When you think of rain, you must only see rain. Not the trees it lands on, not the clouds it falls from. Only the rain itself. Every drop. Zoro tried. He pictured the silver streaks falling from the sky, but then he saw them splashing on the dojo roof. The image shifted to the smell of wet earth. Then to the clouds. His brow furrowed. I can't keep it. Kushiro didn't open his eyes. Because you're letting your thoughts wander. Your mind must be like the edge of a blade, straight, unbroken, and cutting toward one purpose. They sat in silence for several moments. The sound of cicadas faded in Zoro's awareness as he returned to the image of rain. Just rain. Nothing else. For a brief, fleeting instant, the world in his mind narrowed to only that, droplets falling endlessly. Kushiro opened his eyes and studied him. Better. Focus is the root of all swordsmanship. Without it, your strikes scatter. Your guard falters. Your will wavers. Zoro cracked one eye open. So, this leads to fighting better. Eventually. But more than that, you can reach a level where true focus can stop a fight before it happens. Can stop a fight before it happens? How can that be possible? Zoro thought to himself. The weight of a gaze. That evening, the dojo was quiet. The younger students had gone home, leaving only Zoro and Kushiro. Kiyoshiro stood in the center of the floor. Zoro, today you learned the seed of focus. Now I will show you one of its fruits, killing intent. Zoro tilted his head. That's just glaring hard at someone, right? Kushiru's voice stayed calm, but there was a steel edge beneath it. No. Killing intent is the projection of your will to cut, so sharp, so certain, that the enemy feels your blade before it moves. He gestured for Zoro to stand at the far end of the dojo. Draw your sword. Zoro gripped his bakken and waited. Kushiro didn't move. He simply stood with his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his katana. Then something shifted. The air seemed to thicken. Zoro felt an invisible weight pressing down on him, cold and heavy. His throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to raise his guard, yet Kushiro hadn't taken a single step. You feel it, Kushiro said softly, his eyes locked on Zoro's. That is the mind's blade. Focus so absolute it cuts without striking. Against weaker men, this alone will freeze them. Against stronger ones, it will steal precious seconds, enough to end the fight. Just as suddenly as it came, the feeling vanished. Zoro realized he'd been holding his breath. Kushiro sheathed his blade and turned away. The body follows the mind. When your mind is sharp enough, even stillness becomes a weapon. Zoro gripped his bakken tighter. He wanted that skill. No, he needed that skill. Sometime later. Did the village move places or something? Zoro said in annoyance. He had been looking for it for hours. The sun had already dipped below the tree line, and the forest was cloaked in deep shadows. Zoro, now a few miles from Shimotsuki village, had, unsurprisingly, lost his way again. Great. Just great, he muttered, brushing aside low-hanging branches. His stomach grumbled, but hunger wasn't his main concern. It was the sound, a deep, guttural growl that rolled through the trees like distant thunder. Zoro stopped. Slowly, his eyes tracked the movement in the darkness ahead. From between two massive cedar trunks emerged a hulking bear, its matted fur catching the faint light of the moon. The animal stood taller than Zoro, its claws glinting like jagged steel. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, predator and prey. Then the bear roared, charging with a speed that belied its bulk. Zoro's hand flew to Wado Ikimonji's hilt. Steady your stance. Control your breath. Read your opponent. Kushiru's voice echoed in his mind. He inhaled deeply, lungs expanding, then let the air out slow. His blade sang as it left its sheath, and he stepped forward to meet the attack. Steel clashed with claw as Zoro redirected the first swipe, pivoting to avoid the second. But the bear was relentless. Every strike of its paw felt like a sledgehammer, every step shaking the earth beneath them. Zoro's muscles burned from the effort of dodging and countering, and sweat stung his eyes. If you are not stronger than the opponent and it's obvious, don't fight the opponent's strength. Use it against them, Kushiro had once said during sparring. Zoro tried, redirecting swipes, slashing at openings, but his blade barely cut through the beast's thick hide. The bear lunged again, this time so close that Zoro felt the rush of hot, rancid breath. Kuina's voice. Don't just swing, cut with purpose. See the strike before it happens. Ignore the noise. Ignore the world. See only the cut. Zoro closed his eyes for a split second, letting everything fade. The wind, the trees, even the pounding of his own heart. In that stillness, he pictured it. The line of the cut, clean and absolute, running through the bear. When his eyes snapped open, they burned with focus. His killing intent surged out like a tidal wave, crashing into the bear. The beast froze mid-step, its muscles locking as if some unseen force had bound it. The world turned gray and all that could be heard was Zoro's heartbeat and the rustling of trees. Zoro's voice rang out in the silence of the gray world. The ego of the entropic world shall be rent in twain. The next moment, Zoro moved. He didn't think. He simply stepped into the cut he had already envisioned, his blade flashing in the moonlight. Time seemed to stretch, the world holding its breath. One sword style. Rashomon. Then, silence. Zoro stood behind the bear, Wado Ikimonji sliding back into its sheath with a sharp click. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a thin red line appeared along the bear's torso, widening as blood spilled out in a dark torrent. The giant collapsed with a heavy thud, shaking the ground one final time. Zoro looked over his shoulder, eyes calm, breathing steady. Guess I'm not completely lost after all, he muttered, turning to continue his journey deeper into the forest. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part when it drops.